Okay, just after 10 o'clock. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our event in partnership with the Fast Growth Cities Group to launch our new report, Fast Growth Cities 2021 and Beyond. The Fast Growth Cities Group, which comprises Cambridge, Milton Keynes, Norwich, Oxford, Peterborough and Swindon, are some of the most successful cities in the UK. And their continued success is not only important for their own patch, but actually is critical to the future success of the UK economy. So this raises the interesting and challenging question, which is what do the fast growth cities need in order to recover from COVID, because they have been affected by COVID like everywhere else, and indeed what do they need in order to return to growth and the success that we saw before COVID. So to discuss the findings and implications of the report, today's event is in two parts. Part one will focus specifically on the report. So we'll hear about what the key findings are, what some of the key issues are. And then part two will broaden out the discussion to explore the role of the fast growth cities to the levelling up agenda and the ambitions of the Cambridge-Oxford corridor more generally. As always, before we begin, a few words of housekeeping. As always, the event is being recorded and will be made available along with the slides on our website after the event. During the event, please keep your microphones on mute. If you want to tweet about the event, which we would like you to, the hashtag is FGCLaunch. There will be opportunities for questions to speakers in parts 1 and 2, and you can submit your questions at any time. You don't have to wait until everyone has finished speaking. And you do this by sending your question via the chat function to ask a question. When we do get sections in when we get to questions in each part, we like you to ask your questions, so be prepared. But if you prefer me to read them out, or indeed Chris to read them out, then just say so when you post your questions, and we'll be all done by 12 o'clock. So let's get going. Let me introduce my speakers for part one. The first speaker you're going to hear from is my colleague, Kathrin and Enkel. Kathrin's a senior analyst at the Centre for Cities and was the lead author of the report, and is going to summarise the key findings and the implications from it. After Kathrin, then we'll hear from Susan Brown. Susan, the chair of the Fast Growth Cities Group and leader of Oxford City Council, and offer her reflections on the report and its implications. And then after Susan, we'll open it out to questions. So without further ado, Kathrin, over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, and welcome. Hi, everyone. So I think before we start talking about fast growth cities, we should think or look at why cities are in generally important for the UK economy. And I think this is outlined here pretty well in the figures I'm showing. So we can see here that despite covering just 10% of land in the UK, more than 50% of businesses and more than 60% of jobs are actually located in cities. And that means that cities are the hubs of the British economy and are important for the role, have an important role inside, but also outside their city borders. And yeah, so today, as you know, we look at a particular set of cities. And I will explain in the course of the presentation why this pattern we've shown on the previous slide is also particularly important for those cities. So we're looking at the fast growth cities. For everyone not really sure where they are, here a map where you can see who's part of it. It's basically a group of cities in the south of England, a group that was formed because of the joint commitment to knowledge-driven growth. And in the report we've launched last week, we analyzed how they performed in the most recent years, mostly between 2014 and 18, and what their performance means for future growth. And we also look at what impact the pandemic has on these cities. Okay, so the first thing we should look at is why fast growth cities are actually so important. As you can see, one reason why fast growth cities are important is because they have a higher proportion of people in employment compared to other places in the UK. This year, figures showing the employment rate for fast growth cities and the UK. So the report shows basically that cities like Oxford and Norwich in particular saw a strong increase in their employment rate. It's about by more than 6.5 percentage points between 2014 and 2018. And in 2018, almost all fast growth cities had a higher employment rate than the UK average. And it's not only the quantity of jobs, as we've seen in the previous slide, but also the quality of jobs fast growth cities offer, which is above the UK average. Here we're looking at knowledge intensive business services. And these are jobs which tend to have like higher salaries and also higher job security. And we can see here that almost all fast growth cities have a higher share of people employed in these industries. So most extreme here, Milton Keynes, for instance, has around 19% of its workforce employed in these kind of jobs compared to the UK average of around 14%. So there's a huge difference. And so that means that their attractive labor markets make fast growth cities basically to employment hubs for the regions and attract many workers from outside, as you can see here. So while in other cities, around 26% of the workforce is commuting from outside the city, in the fast growth cities, on average, that's 40% of the workforce. So, and as you can see in Cambridge, that's particularly extreme because 60% of the workforce is commuting from outside. And I think we can see with this slide here that fast growth cities play a very important role also beyond their city borders. Yeah, and in addition to their role as regional employment hubs, the fast growth cities do also have some of the most innovative places in the UK. So that means that the innovations and the people they skill in the universities are actually beneficial for the entire UK. You can see here Cambridge and Oxford classified as super cities with very strong innovation systems, encompassing university and business innovation strength, but also like Milton Keynes and Peterborough, very strong, particularly when it comes to business innovation, and Norwich having a very important university. So yeah, so in the previous slides, we've seen why fast growth cities are important, and now we look at the reasons why we see the performance and what factors help fast growth cities to keep on growing and delivering jobs and innovation across the country. Yeah, one reason why the fast growth cities performed so well on the labor markets is in the most recent years, many of them have made progress regarding the skill levels of their population. That's either by increasing the high skilled population at the left part of the figure you see, reducing the number of people with no skills, or both. And that basically made them more attractive places for businesses because they find the skilled labor businesses need. On the left side, you can see that Milton Keynes and Norwich saw the highest increase of people with no formal education, with high skills, and Cambridge, Milton Keynes and Norwich all saw the share of people with no formal education drop at a rate above the national average. So that means also that investing in skills must remain at the top of the agenda, particularly for those places which didn't see such a strong development of their skill levels to remain more attractive for businesses. And yeah, so the success of fast growth cities is also reflected in their industrial structure because, as we can see here, most of them have larger shares of employment in high-skilled exporting industries than the national average. So high-skilled exporting industries, these are like industries like investment banking, business consulting, or advertising. And you can see here Swindon, Milton Keynes, and Cambridge are leading in this regard. And they're important, high-skilled exporters are important for an economy because they're very productive, sell beyond their local markets, and create actually also demand for local services. So if you have a high share of these industries, the whole economy will be spurred by their demand. So the ability to strengthen that sector further will determine also the future success of fast growth cities. And from previous research, we know that most of these high-skilled exporting businesses are actually clustering in city centers because city centers have benefits such as the proximity to similar businesses and a deep pool of workers. And in this slide, we're comparing the use of city center floor space of the fast growth cities with very strong city centers and very rather weak city centers in the UK. And I think there we can see that a lot of places, the fast growth cities have city centers which are similar to rather weaker areas because they have a high share of retail. In some places that comes natural because in Oxford or Cambridge, for instance, the business districts are not located in the city centers. But for other places, there is definitely room to do to improve the city centers and to increase actually the share of office space. And Milton Keynes here is leading with a very high share of office space in the city center. So I've talked a lot now about the reasons why the fast growth cities have more successful labor markets and what must happen that these places can grow further. But in other areas, the fast growth cities are already confronted with the costs of their own growth. I think this becomes particularly visible when we look at this slide here. It's the housing affordability ratio and the change over the years. So we can see that there is a high demand for housing, and this had led to unaffordability in a lot of places. So Cambridge and Oxford were already very expensive places, but this has worsened, and also cities like Swindon and Milton Keynes have seen housing unaffordability rising at a pace above the national average. So on the one hand, that's a good sign because the worsening of affordability reflects the demand and for these places and how attractive they are to live. But it for sure also poses like constraints and future growth when we think about that key workers cannot access affordable housing anymore. Over the time, the city will also become less attractive for workers in other industries who are like relying on the services of these businesses. And linked to the demand for housing, I've shown is also the demand for transport of workers to access the cities. So we can see here that for all fast growth cities, the car is the most common mode of transport. And if the trend we've seen in the past, so increasing demand to work and to live in the places is further increasing, and people keep on traveling inside from outside the city to work in the cities, we will see further pressure on fast growth cities with regards to the city center congestion and air pollution. In another piece, we've already looked at the air pollution in fast growth cities, and 4 of them are actually having already pretty high levels. So this is also a cost of the growth we've seen. So in the previous slides, we looked at the opportunities and challenges of the fast growth cities prior to the crisis, and you can see given even then, or because of the success they had, they actually were facing or are facing challenges, congestion, growth, housing, etc. But in addition to this, they also are affected by the crisis, and this is like the section we're looking at the impact of the crisis. And we're looking at the first national lockdown, the impact of the first national lockdown on labor markets and the high streets. I'm just looking at the first lockdown because it gives a good insight on the direct effect of the crisis. And in most cases, these patterns we see are representative then for the further course of the crisis, given all the changing circumstances. If you need more updated data, you can go on our website. As you know, we have the high street tracker and the unemployment tracker, where you can see the whole course for each city. So as already said, despite fast growth cities being relatively successful economies, they were not entirely shielded from the crisis, but also significantly affected. So here you can see the unemployment and GRS as uptake for until July 2020. And there you can see that, all cities basically were affected. On average, 30% of the workforce was on furlough and 5.9% of the workplace claimed unemployment benefits. And this is a significant amount. And I think we need to keep this in mind because we know fast growth cities are strong, but even for these cities, the crisis had a significant effect. On the other hand, it's slightly lower than other places in the UK, and this is then also a benefit of the fast growth cities. As I said in the beginning, they have a very strong labor market with knowledge intensive business services, where a lot of people can work from home and are not directly affected by the crisis. But the impact of the crisis also becomes particularly visible if we look at what happened to the footfall in the high streets of these cities. This is like an extraction of our high street tracker, which is looking at the footfall in high streets on fast growth cities and compares it with the average in the UK. And there you can see that after the first, so when the lockdown was introduced, there was a strong drop in footfall in the city centres, and it only slowly recovered until the first lockdown was lifted. And there you can also see that the cities were not similarly affected. The light blue line we see at the bottom, that's Oxford. It's very strong, was or is very strongly affected. So the footfall never really recovered and was very low. This is because Oxford is also attracting a lot of tourists, a lot of students, and they are not there anymore to be actually in the city center to walk around and to spend. And yeah, as already said, so the low footfall in the high street has also an impact on the spending in the city center. So this year is the development of the spend index during the first lockdown. And there we can see that similarly to the footfall in the city centers, also the spending never really recovered after the lockdown, because less people were in the city centers, or maybe they also did not have the money anymore to actually spend it in the high street. And you can see again, Oxford actually, lagging very much behind here. So an originally very successful city with a strong innovation system, a good economic structure, struggling here in this case. So by the end of July, the spending in Oxford was just at 50% compared to pre-pandemic levels, whereas in other cities like Norwich, it was up to 80%. Yeah, so we could see that despite fast growth cities being rather successful places in the UK, their success can actually not be taken for granted, because first they have to grapple with the costs of their growth, meaning basically pressure on housing or on public transport, which was already there prior to the crisis. And second, we also could see that they were significantly affected by the crisis. So that means that these places are under pressure, and the support needs there needs to be support which helps them to deliver jobs to their hinterlands and also innovation to the entire economy also in the future. So for sure there must be, or there should be, an immediate focus on fast growth cities and of government support on the economic recovery. And this could be in the form of supporting the high street to both deal with ongoing social distancing restrictions, allowing them to use outside space, etc., but also providing support and guidance to make most of the financial support, such as business support, etc. But as we enter the recovery phase, the fast growth cities need to deal with the more long-term strategic policy areas. For instance, when it comes to skills and education, the question will be how to draw and to keep on more high-skilled people into the labor market. And even though they do well in productivity and innovation, there are some challenges as we've seen it. And the question is then how to maintain the strong innovation system they have. And strengthening town centers and city centers will be important too, as we know that high-skilled exporting industries which are productive are clustering there. And then housing and planning, there are big questions. So there's big pressures on housing and infrastructure, and fast growth cities need to think carefully about the nature of housing supply, infrastructure response, transport, and congestion. And yeah, when it comes to devolution, as we've seen, fast growth cities, they have a role which is not only within their city boundaries, but outside of the city boundaries. The question here to think about are whether it makes more sense that policy areas which have implications for more than one district, like strategic transport decisions or housing, are better made in the same place than in different authorities. Yeah.
Kathrin, thank you very much indeed. Lots more in the report, a good summary of it. And particularly, I think, reminding us that the strengths beforehand, many of those strengths that we saw in our fast growth cities were in the innovation and value added activities, which if you were here with us last week, Lord Sainsbury, when he published his report, was reminding us that if we want to drive economic performance and to be more successful, then emphasizing innovation and value added activities is going to be a key element to that. And our fast growth cities have strengths already in that, but also reminding us that some of the challenges, in a sense, the challenges of success, whether it's cost of living or congestion or very competitive labour markets were pre-pandemic challenges. They were there beforehand, and we were grappling with some of these issues in our fast growth cities. And then, despite some of the debate and the commentary, again reminding us that COVID has also had an effect on these previously well-performing cities, which then raises questions about the nature and strength of the recovery given the uncertainty. And we'll obviously see more of that as we ease out of lockdown in the next few months. So thank you very much indeed for that, Kathrin. So let's turn to Susan. Susan Brown, as said, chair of Fast Growth Cities Group and leader of Oxford City Council, is going to give a response and then a broader reflection, and then we'll get into questions from you. So Susan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and also thank you very much, Kathrin, for that very good introduction to a report which sets out both the possibilities of our fast growth cities, but also the challenges that we're currently facing. Let me start by saying I'm really delighted as the chair of Fast Growth Cities to welcome so many people to this launch of the update report by the Centre for Cities on our fast growth cities, and I always particularly enjoy that slide which has Oxford down as a super city, because that's how I think of my city as well. But on a more serious note, this report couldn't come at a more important time. The successful rollout of the vaccine programme by our wonderful NHS, along with thousands of volunteers, means that the UK is likely to be the first major economy to come out of lockdown. And here in Oxford, we've been particularly proud of the fantastic University of Oxford research, along with the support of AstraZeneca, that has delivered that not just to our country, but to populations around the world at an affordable price. And I mention that because that is exactly the sort of innovation and research that we're talking about, that our cities are delivering. That vaccine and others mean that our economies are now on the brink of opening up again. But that reopening of our towns and cities will be phased, meaning that businesses are facing a long route back to normality. And as we've seen, particularly in Oxford, there is quite a long way to go. So budget measures may help us avoid a potential cliff edge this year, but avoiding disaster is definitely not enough. We need to invest wisely in our economic recovery, particularly in those places that are well placed to bounce back quickly. We are going to be important to refloating the economy as a whole. The Fast Growth Cities Group, Cambridge, Milton Keynes, Norwich, Oxford, Peterborough and Swindon, encompass some of the most successful and innovative places in the UK. We all have a significant impact beyond our administrative boundaries, and importantly for the rest of the UK, we are net contributors to the Treasury. So our message to government is very clear. Don't take our post-COVID economic recovery for granted. Our success is essential to underpin central government's levelling up agenda. But currently, we're concerned that there's a clear risk of us being levelled down. Government's thinking is exposed in its levelling up list of local authorities. I find it extraordinary that the government thinks that Richmondshire is in greater need of levelling up than two of the most economically divided cities in the country, Oxford and Cambridge, where there is real deprivation, cheek by jowl with great wealth. Where's our levelling up? We need government investment to kickstart the transformational economic growth that will benefit the whole of the UK and give us a truly inclusive economy. As has been well said earlier, all of our cities function as regional employment hubs with strong labour markets and centres of innovation. In Oxford, we had an 82.4% employment rate in 2019, an increase of 6.8 percentage points, 3 times the national average. But the pandemic has shown us how exposed many people's livelihoods are to economic shocks. And the fewer qualifications you have, the more precarious your position. And this isn't a problem that just affects Northern England. Even in our fast growth cities, we still have far too high numbers of citizens with low levels of educational attainment and skills, and a big skills gap with employers seeking skilled workers. To build back better from COVID-19, the government needs to support people across the country with access to further education opportunities that will actually prepare them for good jobs in their local area. If implemented effectively, there'd be an important role for local government in coordinating the delivery of this. We already work alongside our local universities, businesses and LEPs to support coordination around skills training and apprenticeships. Innovation's underpinned by the strength of the higher education sector across our cities. Our cities house some of the most important universities and research organisations, not just in the UK, but in the world. These institutions have a multiplier effect on jobs in local services. The better they perform, the higher the local disposable income in the economy. And so the higher the demand for services from local businesses such as shops and restaurants. But they risk being held back by skills shortages. We need to increase the innovative capacity and the basic skills of the workforce across our cities. And we also need investment in place. With Oxford at the forefront of scientific advancement globally, the demand for science and tech-led space in the city is increasing exponentially. Our Oxford West End Innovation District offers a fantastic opportunity to unlock this. We will be bringing forward 350,000 square metres of space over 15 years for spin-out companies, inward investment, as well as much needed housing. 1.5 billion will deliver the largest scale mixed-use development project in generations in our city and the largest inner city development opportunity across the Oxford-Cambridge arc. For most of our cities, economic and population growth in recent years has increased the strain on our local housing markets, creating growing challenges of affordability, and no more so than in Oxford. If unaffordability continues to rise at a pace similar to the past, most fast growth cities will face problems in meeting the needs of both their economies and their residents, problems that we are already facing in Oxford. Not addressing housing unaffordability risks pricing workers out. We're committed to growth, but desperately need to increase the supply of houses and to tackle that issue of affordability. This is, as I've said, a particular issue for Oxford, with limited land available for development as a result of constraints, including the Greenbelt, historic conservation areas, as well as environmental constraints on the city. But there is potential, there is hope out there. Our new local plan allows for a further 11,000 homes in the city, and urban extensions for Oxford are now built into the local plans for our neighbours and our county-wide planning, creating the more sustainable developments we have long been arguing for. We need to see large-scale investment in high-quality, low or zero-emission affordable housing. At Oxford City Council, we are doing our bit. Our housing company will deliver 2,000 homes over the next 10 years. But we also need more powers to challenge the loss of housing to short-term lets to companies such as Airbnb, which are shrinking our available housing for our local populations. So devolution is a key part of this as well. Transport is another critical issue for all of us as regional employment hubs. 50% of people working in Oxford travel in from outside the city, even more in Cambridge. Commuting by car is not sustainable. This is just as big an issue for Oxfordshire and our county's knowledge spine as it is for the city itself. We need to see greater connectivity through public transport and active travel, both at a local level, but also providing that last mile connection across the Oxford-Cambridge arc. East-West Rail will be critically important, but government needs to extend it beyond Oxford to connect with Swindon and Bristol, and beyond Cambridge to link through to Norwich. And importantly, the decision not to electrify it throughout needs to be reversed. This is a short-term saving at a long-term financial and environmental cost. Our high streets also need support. The pandemic has seen a sharp drop in footfall, particularly in Oxford, as Kathrin mentioned, because of our significant dependence on students who make up 24% of our population normally, and tourists who are normally present in their millions. Centre for Cities proposes a city centre productivity fund to provide capital investment to make city centres more attractive places to locate and to do business. We know that we need more people living and working in our city centres to make them the productive places for our local economies that we want to see. The government has a unique opportunity to help drive economic recovery with the emerging plans for the Oxford-Cambridge arc. In Oxfordshire, our Growth Board has modelled shared governance with our partner councils, our universities and our local enterprise partnership, and that has been central to our success in attracting investment and jobs. We need to see a similar local government-led partnership approach for the arc. But remember, within the arc, just as within each county, it's our cities, Oxford, Cambridge, Milton Keynes and Peterborough, but also Norwich and Swindon, that offer the biggest opportunities of increased productivity from our global strengths in science, technology, and high-value manufacturing. We need to be at the heart of recovery plans with support in the provision of new homes, particularly affordable ones that meet our zero carbon goals. Government should give local city leaders the powers and resources to shape the future. With this in mind, the 4 cities of the Oxford-Cambridge Arc should be fully engaged within the new governance structures that government is planning for the region, including the new Arc growth body. We're also still waiting for the government to publish its white paper on devolution in England, but I hope that once it is published, it will pledge a significant transfer of power and resources down towards the people and institutions in local government that have the knowledge to make the best use of them. It's vital that any future devolution deals ensure that urban areas have a strong voice in decisions that are made. I'm looking forward to hearing your questions and from the other speakers. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Susan. And just to say for others, you'll hear from some of the other cities in part 2 as well. So there's a chance to get their sort of input into some of the issues that you heard Kathrin setting out. I suppose I'll come to you first, Susan. We've had a couple of questions on this and you touched on it in your initial response, but just say a little bit more about, the importance of working across boundaries on the one hand. You kind of alluded to that and the importance of it, whether it's transport, whether it's housing, or actually whether it's skills, but also a couple of questions as to what is it that the fast growth cities as a group can do more than, the individual cities themselves, in a sense. What's the value of the group to the individuals and then to government more generally? So just pick up on those two elements.
Both very good questions. So in terms of working in partnership, I mean, I think one of the things that the pandemic has taught people, even if they hadn't learned that lesson before, is the importance of working in partnership. But actually, I think in Oxfordshire, we have had a strong tradition of working, certainly in recent years, with local government partners, but also the LEP and our universities, to come together to get government investment and to solve our problems, because actually as we've seen, our cities don't entirely stop at the boundaries. We do have people coming in from the surrounding area to use our city's facilities, to work there, but also to spend their leisure time there. And we haven't got the space in our city to provide all the housing that's needed. So the kind of very tightly drawn boundaries around our city are going to have to expand in order to house people. So that partnership working has been tremendously important. In terms of fast growth cities, I think it is always good to come together to learn from each other. And every time that we have a meeting as fast growth cities, I learn new things from other city leaders who are facing a lot of the similar issues that I am facing, but have had different ways of tackling them. So I think part of it is simply the sharing of knowledge and experience, but we all have different strengths, and together, both geographically and as somewhat similar cities, we have that very powerful place, both geographically, but also in terms of the country's economy. And I think that's the point that we would seek to get across today, is that it is, we are a very significant body in terms of the nation's economy.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so we get variations on this question at most of our events. So let's kick off on that, because it touches a little bit on your points and our points about the role of the city more generally. Jane Patterson Todd, are you still on the call? If you are, you asked a question about working from home, and I just want to put that. We've had several questions in this, Susan, so just bear with me. But Jane, are you still on the call?
Yes, I am.
Fire away.
You can all hear me. So
yes, we can.
Okay, great. My question was, with the growth and demand for relocation away from city living, given more remote working, is there a likely flattening in house prices in cities?
Great, thank you very much, Jane. So there's a lot to unpack in that, Susan, but your reflections on what you think working from home might do or will do, to your patch and then obviously to other patches as well, and how you might need to respond. And I'll get Kathrin to come in because we've done quite a bit of work on some thinking on that as well. But you kick us off, Susan.
Thank you. Well, we've had historically a shortage of office space in the city, particularly in the city centre. And so we are not seeing any slowdown actually in the desire for office space in the city. And I think, yes, I think the pandemic has shown us that people can work from home, and I'm at home today doing this, but actually I think there's also a desire for people to spend time together, and I think we have also understood the value of some of those conversations that we're missing currently when we are working at home, the accidental ones when you're sort of going to get a coffee in the kitchen in the office. And I think increasingly there is going to be a desire to have shared office space in different ways. So I think we'll probably see in our future a mix of different office space, from people who are working some of the time at home, maybe sometimes going into not even a satellite office, but shared office space where they're working with other people who may be in related businesses but may not be. And then at other times they're going into the main office. I think for Oxford itself, we will see people who might have been based in London using some of that shared office space in Oxford instead for some of the time. So I don't see a big reduction in the need for office space, particularly, as I said, in Oxford, where frankly we've always had a shortage of it anyway. I think there's still going to be a need for office space. It'll be different, but it will be there.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And it reminds us, when we talk in the generality, we need to get into the specifics and understand the conditions in different places, actually, and the conditions that were there before the pandemic, and then how the pandemic, obviously, and the easing of the lockdown will then play out in different places. Kathrin, we've done quite a bit of work on city centres and the role of working from home. I remember you doing some very initial work back in April and May about the potential in different places to work from home. Just say something about where our thinking is and how city centres are likely to evolve.
Yeah, I think first of all, I totally agree with Susan. So we at the Centre for Cities do not think that the city centre is dead or the city, and it will always be a high demand for space in the city centre, because these businesses which located there did it for a reason. A lot of them, they could have already located somewhere else because they're like working in tech prior to the crisis, but they didn't do it because the city centers, they're offering to these businesses like access to certain workers, interaction, face-to-face interaction, and this is very likely that exactly this pattern will remain through after the crisis. And even though it can be that some people or like some companies decide that people can work from home, it won't be that the people are then moving very far away. It would be probably rather that the people maybe stay in the area because they will travel to the city center because there is the workplace. And I think another point or another thing we need to look at is that not all jobs can actually be done from home, and this will always be the case. So these workers like in hospitals, retail, cafes, bars, they are physical jobs, and these people need to go to work. And these all the amenities, they're also naturally located in the city center. Like the Centre for Cities did research on amenities last year, and there not only jobs are clustered in city centers, but also amenities, because there's the highest footfall, and all these people working in theaters, museums, bars, restaurants, they will have to go to work. So city center space will always be in high demand.
Very good. Thank you very much. My very brief and slightly flippant summary is, the wilder claims of working from home should be taken with a very, very large pinch of salt in terms of what will actually happen. That would be my 15-second takeaway in terms of that. And you'll hear a little bit more, I think, in part 2 about what that means. Susan, I want to come back to you again, because you hinted at very diplomatically in your comments about your worry about the government's attention being elsewhere. You worried that, in a sense, that the recovery would just be taken for granted in Oxford and the other cities. I mean, just unpack. I mean, why is that? Why is the concern that the government is taking you for granted? Is it just because they look and past performance and say you'll all be fine, we can devote our time and attention elsewhere, or is there something more to it? Susan, your kind of reflections on that?
Well, I think that the list of levelling up authorities that I referred to is certainly a pretty key indication of the government's thinking on this. And you know, I have made this comment to ministers and civil servants on a number of occasions. We do need to look at levelling up everywhere, and I think people often have a very false idea of our cities and assume that they're, you know, everyone in them is extremely wealthy, and that is far from the case. There is real deprivation and poverty, unfortunately, in all of our cities, and we work hard to tackle that. But some of this is not. It is not currently in our powers alone to deliver. And in particular, I think some of the investment that's going to be needed to reskill our populations and to level up in terms of educational attainment and skills, we are going to need outside influences. I mean, we're a city council, but we're not a unitary authority, so we're not responsible for education in our city. But though frankly, I think the levers for local government in terms of educational attainment are pretty weak anyway these days. So I think there's an awful lot really that government centrally is going to have to do to try and invest in educational attainment and raising skill levels across the country. And that if we leave it only into the areas that are most deprived, then I think we'll put their recovery at risk as well, because if you lose our economies, then you won't have the money to invest elsewhere either.
Yeah, and this touches on your point around autonomy and devolution. It's not just about, you're not just making the case about you getting more of the government pound. It's actually open up the opportunities for you to use your own assets and your own resources, to raise your own investment, so that you can then replow that back into your places to make them more successful, but also to make sure that you can deal with the skills issues or the transport issues. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, we've got the most highly centralised local government pretty much anywhere in Europe, from what I can understand. You're probably better qualified than I to comment on that. But we as local government have really only got the powers that the government decide that we can have, and obviously we try to do everything we can to coordinate and bring together people. And use our soft power, if you like, to achieve things locally, and we do that, but we actually do need to have a bit more power in order to, and this isn't actually an argument for investment particularly, or not, certainly not exclusively. It is about saying to places that you can get on and make the policy that is right for your area, and in a city that will be different to the surrounding rural area, and we do need to be able to have those powers. And I think the example that I used around short-term lets is a very prime example, where increasingly, certainly for Oxford and Cambridge, but also for a number of other cities where there are high levels of tourism, this is having a really deleterious effect on our housing, and it's taking out of family housing huge numbers of houses now, which are basically are empty a large part of the time, and we have no real ability to resist some of that. It's extremely difficult under current planning and licensing laws. So I think there are a range of areas where we need government to look at either devolving more power directly to us, or looking at the sort of central regime in terms of legislation on this.
Yeah, no, you make a great point that we need to be much more mindful and differentiate when we get into conversations about the role of government and devolution, for argument's sake, to be distinguishing between the power questions and then the finance and resources questions. Sometimes those need to come together, but sometimes they can be held apart, and actually you can make quite significant progress through the power strand, even if the ultimate resources coming down from government remain constant. Very good. Okay, so we need to move on to part two. So thank you very much to Susan and to my colleague Kathrin for that opening session. Part two is going to be chaired by Chris Murray. Many of you will know Chris. He's the Chief Executive of the Core Cities. So Chris, I will hand the chairing baton over to you to introduce your panel. Chris, away you go.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks very much for that. And a great point to end on, actually, in terms of the previous discussion. I was just reflecting that, in fact, the amount of tax retained at a local level in the UK is about 9% in cities, compared to about 25%, I think, is the average across Europe, 50% in the US. And most of that is business rates and council tax, which is in a very parlous state, as I'm sure you know at the moment. I did actually used to work in one of the fast growth cities, Milton Keynes, which I retain an enormous affection for, and I can see a couple of people have already commented from Milton Keynes, which is great to see. Core cities are different. You know, they are largely post-industrial cities. They tend to be a lot bigger, but actually the challenges that you set out in the report are very similar to the ones that fast growth cities face. But I think it's important to recognise that the ways in which those challenges are met may not be the same. They may be different in different places. And what appears to be one big problem, like retail, for example, may in fact need many different solutions. So that really is going to be part of the focus of this next panel. We're going to take a closer look from the local level, the balance between interventions within a place and interventions between places, and the role, for example, of infrastructure within that. And we've got a fantastic panel who are each going to speak for 5 minutes in the following order, just so they're aware of this as well. Bridget Rosewell, economist of incredible pedigree in relation to cities and urban economics, and also a commissioner from the National Infrastructure Commission. Councillor Lewis Herbert, leader of Cambridge City Council, followed by Councillor David Renard, leader of Swindon City Council, and finally Andrew Dernie, Senior Finance Manager of Aviva, based in Norwich. So Bridget, if I can bring you in first, please. The report talks about opportunities for growth, but also costs which can act as a drag. And just be interested to get your take on that and the role, particularly of infrastructure and wider planning frameworks in addressing that. Over to you, Bridget.
Thanks, Chris, and it's good to be here. And sorry, a message just flashed up across the screen that rather distracted me. So 5 minutes on where I think we're sitting in around all of this. So National Infrastructure Commission, one of the biggest reports that we did right early on was absolutely about the ARC. Our acronym for this was CAMCOX, to try and make sure we were talking about not just Cambridge and Oxford, or Oxford and Cambridge, but Milton Keynes and the other places as well. We did not go as far as Norwich or Swindon. I'll come back to those in a moment or two. But what we were looking at is what were the requirements, and particularly what were the government requirements, to make sure that that success of those cities and the innovation, the growth, the high productivity could continue. And our core conclusion, I guess, the biggest conclusion, was that the affordability of houses was the really biggest issue. And some of the charts that Kathrin put up earlier certainly really brought that home. And that continuing the success, bringing in more people, enabling not just high paid people, but all of the lower paid people also to work successfully. And I think that is something that really mustn't be underestimated. It required more housing. And so we came up with a million houses needed, compared to about the 500,000 actually already in local plans across the ARC. And indeed that we needed to try and make sure that that volume of housing would make housing more affordable, more accessible, not to professors, but to postdocs, to nurses, to teachers, to administrators, to porters, to all of the people who make it possible to have a high productivity economy. one of the things that I always sort of mention at this point is that innovation is not just about the high tech. It is notable that Pret-a-Manger revolutionized sandwiches and started in central London because there was the market there that enabled that to happen. So innovation is a broader brush thing than production of vaccines, though vaccines are indeed very important, and obviously proud of the Oxford AstraZeneca innovation in that space, and speaking as an Oxford girl myself. But with how do we produce the right level of housing, and how do we manage housing affordability so that you can then make sure that you can do all of that? And that brings you back to powers. It brings you back also to transport. So one possible way of thinking about that is for Oxford and Cambridge to be more successful and to have better housing, you simply bite into the green belt. That would be one possibility. Alternatively, you can say that a more effective way of dealing with that, and given particularly the importance of the green belt to local populations, what you need is to produce better transport facilities so that you can build housing where it's more readily easier to produce, but then you need to produce the transport systems, and particularly public and low carbon transport systems, which enable people to access where the jobs are likely to be. And our focus then, pre-pandemic obviously, was less on the availability of jobs, because the pressure was the jobs exist, where do we find people to fulfill them? And we could debate this at some length, but I suspect that job pressure will come back, and the housing pressure and the planning, and how you get the balance between the different parts of the planning system is going to be really important. And that brings me, I think, to my last point, which is the devolution point, which was just mentioned by, well, it was mentioned by everybody so far. You need central government, because some of this needs to be thought about from a finance point of view, and what's the right role for the national taxpayer in producing underlying infrastructure, such as a railway. But we need also to show at a local level that you're making the right planning decisions, so that if there is a railway, there will be enough people using it to make sure it can pay for itself. And I've had these arguments at various points over the last few years, and with central government. We need to show that using general taxpayer finance to provide a piece of underlying infrastructure will pay for itself operationally, because the houses will be there, the people will be there who will want to use that infrastructure. So thinking about the interaction between all of these things needs to be done at local level, and needs, I have to say, local politicians who are willing to stand up and be counted. And I'm very pleased to see all of you here today to do exactly that. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the next stage of this discussion. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Bridget. I'll just come back with a quick sort of supplementary, if I may. I think that the point about housing, incredibly well made, and the challenges of unlocking brownfield, for example, which has been a real bugbear in cities for many years. But also, do you think that the issue of quality and placemaking, it will have a different emphasis to it post-COVID? So, for example, if you've been in a two-bed, relatively high-rise city centre apartment with little access to open space during lockdown, which previously might have been a very high status apartment, one might be thinking differently about that and what one needs in the immediate environment. Do you think that is it too optimistic to think that there might be a kind of return to quality placemaking in that respect?
Never mind a return to quality placemaking, so any quality placemaking. I'm not sure that we've done this well over the last few decades, actually. In fact, I'm pretty sure we haven't. And certainly when we're working on the ARC, one of the spurs for the design principles that we've been pushing in the National Infrastructure Commission was the result of particularly myself and Sadie Morgan, who's another commissioner and who's been leading the charge on the design side, visiting places like Milton Keynes and thinking, we're not doing this well enough. We need to make sure that places are places you can push a pram, places that you've got good pedestrian access, public transport access. How do we think about that? We had a competition in it. Hopefully, therefore, the recovery from COVID will make people think harder about placemaking and design. We were trying to get them to think harder about that before the pandemic. Public space, green space, trees, all of these things are going to be air quality. All of these things, I think, are really rushing up the agenda at us. What I think we need to do, though, is to make sure that we react more to what real people need and not theory. So don't accept any place plan that is only done on a helicopter view. What does it look like at eye level? I once tried to reject every single entry to a competition I was shortlisting, which didn't have an eye level view. I didn't end up with very many.
Very interesting. Thanks, Bridget. And it does feel like, I agree. I think there is a bit of a moment to, and you're right about not returning, because we haven't really ever cracked it. Certainly not for a long time. But returning to some of the ambition of things like the Urban White Paper and the emergence of organisations like CABE, Commission for Architecture and Built Environment, from that. Lewis, if I could turn to you now, and if you could just talk to us about the Cambridge perspective. What is needed for Cambridge to do well now, but also to play its role for the wider area? And do you think, just as a sort of supplementary to that, do you think that the voice of cities is strong enough within government and within the government's levelling up agenda to achieve those things? Over to you.
Thank you, Chris, and also thank you to the report authors. I think I'll just get rid of these. I think it's really important that what we do is evidence-based. So I do urge the very valued people that are on this call to just read that report and focus on some of the potential interventions that will make a difference in a challenging next few years. So 5 minutes, I'll just give you a few thoughts. I call Cambridge a city of considerable magic, and one of the reasons why we can make the most of that is the teamwork that we undertake. So I consider partnerships to be a journey. We don't know where they're going to lead, and a little bit like the eventual culmination of the East-West Rail, which is a vital project. We just have to buy a ticket, and we have to be open to the journey. Clearly, we've got very powerful objectives as different cities, and it has been a real strength that the 6 of us get along and share an agenda, and we believe in cities. So partnerships for me really matter in life. I haven't got any sort of singular selfish view of the world for Cambridge. I do think that we have to be part of this wider work. We are not bookends. You've heard from Susan from Oxford, and I endorse 99.9% of what Susan said. And it's important that we also be thinking of the arc and its wider levelling up, out to Norwich, out to Swindon, and just the base that we also provide for benefits in other parts of the country. We're not after nicking resources from the north. By government recognising that we have opportunities and investing in us in the right way, that will benefit the whole of the UK. So I pay tribute to Bridget Rosewell and Sadie Morgan and the National Infrastructure Commission, because you really opened the door for government to think there's something else outside London. And now government's starting to talk about something else outside the south. So I see great value in us doing that. So P for partnerships, P for planning, P for strategic planning, because it is important that we think along this arc and broader. And I endorse the value of there being a strategic spatial plan. And I see on this call some really clever strategic planners, and we'd like your input into that, because strategic planning unblocks a lot of the obstacles. It's already been said that government really doesn't listen to us enough. And I know from our exchanges with government, albeit that we've worked well through this epidemic, that they still treat us as juniors in the partnership. We still have huge amounts of red tape. We have, as you said, Chris, we only retain about 9% of the income the wealth that we generate in terms of local spend. And that isn't good enough. We are grown-ups. We have to be treated as that. The third P for me that really matters, and this builds on what Susan said, we're not a rich city, we're a mixed city. We've got a huge diversity and a big gap between rich people in Cambridge and poor people. And that's the same for our 6 cities. And we've got to reduce that gap. So we do need the tools to build more affordable housing, council housing, like the 540 council homes we're currently building, and just accept that we've got to bridge that divide. Our unemployment currently, our people on universal credit, has leapt from previously 1,400 to 3,500. It's not as big a problem as some areas, but those jobs, those people, the opportunity of skills really, really matters. And so as a successful economy, we need our town centres, our city centres, we need our education, we need our international links, which have been severely damaged over the last 18 months, but we need all types of employment. If we lose our airport, we want to keep the engineering jobs, we want to keep engineering land. We are only going to be successful, whether it's Cambridge or Milton Keynes or Swindon or Norwich or Peterborough or Oxford, if we actually have the full range of employment. So it's all of our people that matter. So what is it about the joint work? I think it is this fact that we're on a journey, and we are open to thinking things through. We need to have some of those points that are mentioned on page 2 of the report, of really just thinking about the talent of organisations, the richness of different businesses that we've got. We've got the rediscovery of the power of cities. People will be a little bit like starlings on a murmuration, wanting to return to cities, because cities are energetic, creative, and like I said, Cambridge is a city of considerable magic, thanks to the fact that people love cities. And we've got to think about those issues of environmental capacity. Last 5 miles of transport needs to be non-car. We need to be centering on moving towards net zero carbon. We have to have biodiversity, both in our cities and building on that. So I think we have huge opportunities. We all love our cities. And I know that there's a lot of people on this call who could contribute to the future debate, Chris. And I hope that today is a start of a conversation that's prompted by this excellent report, detailed evidence, a massive review compared to our 2016 data. And it will help us if we work on the data and we work on the evidence, and then we will bounce back strongly from the damage that the pandemic's done to our economy, all of our economies. And we want government to, as I say, treat us like grown-ups, because we can do the job, and our cities are powerful, creative, and determined to tackle inequality, as well as be zero carbon in the future. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Lewis. And I think those points are very well made about the nature of a national-local relationship and how that needs to shift. Could go on now to David, please, for the perspective from Swindon. And I think particularly interesting to hear about the link to the ARC and how important that is to you, what is needed for Swindon to do well, but also to leverage its benefits for the wider area. David.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. As was said earlier on, there is concern that government investment is going to go north, and one of the reasons as fast growth cities that we got together a few years ago is because we recognise that collectively outside of London we are the most powerful part of the UK PLC economy. We all have similar but not always necessarily 100% shared issues to contend with, as the report lays out. But I think if we do lobby government, we can secure some of that investment. For example, in Swindon, we've recently been awarded £19.5 million of the Towns Fund, and a couple of months ago, £25 million of the Future High Streets Fund. And picking up on the point that Andrew made earlier on, it's these sorts of investments in public realm and infrastructure that enable the private sector to be or to enthuse them to come in and make the additional large-scale investments that we all need to see. So we do need to make sure that when these funds come along, that we collectively get our share of them to make sure that our economies continue to grow and continue to be as successful as they have been previously. So on the point of the ARC and east-west connectivity, government do talk about east-west connectivity, but it's always seemed to me that if you're only talking about Oxford to Milton Keynes and on to Cambridge, that's not really east-west connectivity in its true sense. And of course, the Chancellor talked last week about free ports and mentioned Harwich and Felixstowe. If we want true east-west connectivity, it's got to be from the West Country, from Bristol through to Swindon to Oxford, through to Cambridge, and then on to Norwich and those East Coast ports. That's the sort of way that we're going to drive the economy through that sort of central belt of the south of England. And that's really what I want to see. Particularly the Swindon to Oxford connection is really important for us. We've got businesses that have offices in both Swindon and Oxford. They make use of the road and infrastructure in particular, which is single carriageway. Our businesses tell us they need that to be improved, and that's something that I've been lobbying for quite some time. And I see there's a real opportunity there to link that up to the expressway between Oxford and Cambridge. But the railway connections are also important. At the moment, if you want to go from Bristol to Swindon to Oxford and then either to the east or up to Birmingham, at the moment you've got a change in Didcot, and quite often your train is pulling into Didcot as your connection to Oxford is pulling out on another platform. And what we want to see is upgraded rail infrastructure to enable more services to run directly through up to Oxford and beyond. We have an extremely good service into London now with the electrification and 50 minutes away, and we've got the connections to Heathrow and Crossrail coming as well, which are all hugely important for the Swindon economy. But for me, the missing part of the jigsaw is that connectivity to Oxford and beyond. As was mentioned earlier on, last mile or 5 miles, however you want to frame it. We've really got to make sure that those journeys can be made. We've seen from research that's been done that the vast majority of car journeys, which we all know we've got to reduce because of climate change, tend to be in that 5 to 15 mile bracket. So if anybody who's doing less than 5 miles can make those journeys on public transport or using active travel modes, and then we can get people out of their cars on those middle journeys, we've got a real fighting chance of tackling climate change. It was touched on earlier on, all of the 6 cities have a functional economic area that's much wider than the cities themselves. And we've got to be mindful that people living there are contributing to our economies, although they're not reflected directly in the figures that you can see in the report before you today. We've also got to be mindful that there are going to be significant changes in the future in terms of travel, working and living patterns post-pandemic. We don't really know exactly what that's going to look like at the moment. We're all surmising that there'll be some return to cities in terms of part working at home, part working in the cities. But we need a greater understanding in the next 12 months and beyond as to exactly what that's going to look like, so we can shape our services and developments accordingly. Similarly, we've seen with public transport, huge reduction in people willing or able to or needing to use that. Will that return to pre-pandemic levels, or can we get it higher? We don't know. And of course, car travel, we're trying to get people more into electric vehicles. But we know that, again, with the climate change agenda, just getting people out of diesel and petrol cars into electric cars is not going to achieve what we want it to. Our town and city centres, of course, are going to change. The trajectory of that has become much faster because of the pandemic. So I agree with what Susan said earlier on. There will be more still need and demand for offices, but equally a lot of those older offices are probably going to be converted into residential, and that's part of what we need to see. We need more people living in city centres, not just travelling in for their work and going out again, and that will also help drive our economies, not just during the day, but into the evening. The knowledge economy, we know that the majority of jobs in the future, there are going to be many more high-skilled, high-knowledge jobs and fewer lower-skilled jobs. We need to train our people to meet those challenges, and that is what we know. We need to maintain our high levels of employment, and that knowledge economy and skills is going to be so important. Just turning briefly to the Swindon, the Swindon context a bit more specifically before I conclude. You can see from the report, Swindon is an economic powerhouse with high productivity, high GVA, high employment, and a very high ratio of private sector jobs versus public sector jobs. And you saw in some of the graphs that our town centre's not been so badly affected, and a number of those factors are the reason for that. But unlike most of our other fellow fast growth cities, affordable or housing costs in Swindon are affordable. We continue to build lots of houses, so it is all about supply and demand, but appreciate that some of my colleagues are less able to provide the levels of supply that we do, but that is a key thing that we need to aspire to. And you will see in the report that Swindon has got more to do in terms of skills and education, but would just remind colleagues that we are the home to all of the UK's research councils. We've also got a university technical college and a college, and also we've secured government funding for an Institute of Technology to enable us to develop our level 4, 5 and skill 6 skills and qualifications. So to conclude, Chris, I just really wanted to quote the paragraph from the report that really sums everything up for me in terms of what we're saying today and what we're trying to achieve. And that's investment in and government support for the fast growth cities must focus first on economic recovery. To directly address the impact of the pandemic, any support should recognise the particular challenges the cities face. Looking longer term, government investment and support must address the fundamental barriers to the city's continued success, particularly in the areas of skills and education, productivity, infrastructure and housing. So I'll leave it there, Chris. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Really comprehensive agenda for recovery and change. So Andrew, over to you finally. Andrew, if you could just keep to 5 minutes, that'd be really appreciated. We'll get a couple of rounds of questions in. So Aviva is in Norwich for a reason. I think we're interested to know about that, and also how Norwich manages those kinds of challenges, that sense of coming together as a team. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. No, and thank you for the invitation to talk. As you said, I've got the good fortune of working in a thriving business in a vibrant city, and being a founding director of the Norwich Business Improvement District and currently chairing the Town Deals Board for Norwich, I can see the benefit of business and city working together to mutual benefit. The report is fascinating. I think it really helps us analyse the things that we're going to have to look at to thrive as cities and how we can work together to get the most out of the arc from Norwich through to Swindon and beyond. And I think Andrew posed a really important question at the head of the meeting, which was, what do fast cities need, and what's the value of us working together as a group? And in answering that question for myself, I've really come up with 4 key themes that I'd like to draw out, put those into an Aviva context, a business working in a city, and a Norwich context, and how we as a group of fast growth cities can use some of that thinking to develop. So that the first theme has been drawn out already, which is you've got to collaborate to compete. And the strength of the fast growth cities is that we've got a unique combination of strengths and areas for improvement, which we can actually work together on to make sure that we're in pole position for any investment coming out of government. I've seen how important this is from a Norwich context. We have a very collaborative city council that's reached out to businesses and institutions, and 4 years ago started on the path of creating a vision for 2040 of what Norwich needed to look like, how it needed to operate. And from that, created 5 very powerful themes describing Norwich, how it needs to develop as a dynamic, creative, connected, livable and fair city. And we've used those 3 themes to be very dynamic across the city, to move fast when opportunities arrive. So it meant that as the Town Deals funding was made available to us, we were able to put that vision into action very quickly. We were able to get our projects in quickly. We got the funding granted. We were one of the first 7 cities and towns to be granted the funding, and one of 3 to get the full £25 million on offer. And that was because the pre-work had been done. That's because we'd worked together over 3 or 4 years to develop that vision, and it meant we were able to move fast. So I think that the challenge for us as a group of cities here, fast cities, is can we collaborate so that we're in pole position for future funding? Take some of this analysis and see, for example, on transport infrastructure and housing, and how we can work together to help each other out and to go and campaign effectively with government to get that funding in. The second theme I wanted to bring out was you've got to educate to innovate. We're seeing that the report supports everything that we know, that education drives growth. It increases your capacity to innovate, and that leads to high-skilled export businesses, which is what we have a track record of developing across the 6 cities. Now, Aviva is absolutely desperate for increasing skills and high skills. We've had to innovate and change our business over hundreds of years, and most currently, home working, digital skills, artificial intelligence. We will be needing high-skilled roles to make sure that we can continue to thrive in Norwich and in the UK. And for Norwich, this is a particularly interesting challenge for us at the time, because we've got a lot of latent talent. We have low social mobility, but on the other side, we've got very strong university innovation. The challenge for us is, can we convert it to business innovation and generate wealth into the city? The Town Deal is the latest investment that we're gaining to actually make that into a reality, and trying to encourage the development of digital and high-end engineering skills into the city, so we can unlock some of that latent talent, and also make sure we've got an environment where if you've got an idea in Norwich, you can develop it and grow that business in Norwich. If the next Google happened to emerge in Norwich, we wouldn't want Google to move away from the city. So we know we have to get the infrastructure right to make that work. The third theme I was going to bring out was you've got to excite people to attract them. You've got to excite businesses to attract people set up in cities for logical reasons, but also largely emotional ones. So we know that we have to paint a picture for Norwich and for Aviva that this is a place where you want to come and work. So a key part of what we're doing is creating that environment where people understand what it means to come and invest in Norwich, and taking opportunities like the redevelopment of East Norwich, which is part of our town deal investment, to reinvent how the city can work. We want to make sure that we're at the cutting edge of how a city needs to combine all the aspects of place and work and living to create innovation and education in an environment that's going to be cutting edge and people would really want to come and work in. And I think that's probably a true theme of all of the 6 cities across these fast growth areas. So how do we create that opportunity? How do we excite people? How do we become that Silicon Valley of the UK PLC, that people want to come and work, they want to come and explore, we make them curious. Aviva's exploring smart working. We still see people coming together, have to come together to innovate and be creative. They can't do that working from home. So we're going to have to adjust how we work, give people the flexibility to work from home, but when they come into the city, make it count. Make it count both from increasing the footfall in the city, but also from how do you bring varied teams together within an Aviva business, but also how does Aviva collaborate with businesses and innovative skills emerging elsewhere in the city. So we've got to excite people to attract them into the city. So to make those 3 themes really sing, you've got to create stories to inspire people, relentlessly communicating real stories. I think we mentioned a little bit earlier about eye-level examples of where businesses and individuals have thrived. And we've got some great stories in Norwich, some really fantastic businesses, Rainbird, Liftshare, Proxama, that have all started up in Norwich. And Aviva's the same. It started 230 years ago as a startup in Norwich and is now a major PLC within the UK. We've got to make sure that people understand that we break out of some of the stereotypes or the myths of our areas. And we've got to make sure that we find every single avenue to shout out about. Most recently, Norwich won the Sterling Prize for architecture based on a very innovative approach to social housing. And it's those sort of great examples we need to shout about and make sure that as a fast cities community, we can make that work. So those were my 4 themes, Chris. Collaborate, compete, educate, so we can innovate. Got to excite people to attract them to the fast cities area. And then we've got to tell the stories relentlessly to everyone who wants to listen that this is the best place to do business. Thank you, Chris.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. Really, really clear. And I think an important mention of emotional connection there as well, because I think we forget sometimes that the pandemic isn't just an economic and health crisis, it's a psychological one as well. It has psychological impacts, particularly in cities. We've had a ton of questions. So what I'm going to do is just wrap a few of those together and go around the panel in the same order that we did for the introductory comments. And brevity would be appreciated from our esteemed guests, and then we might get 2 rounds of questions in. So the first 3 questions, do not feel you have to answer all of these, pick from them. Do you think that the impact on fast growth cities has been less or the same than other places? Are they in a better place to bounce back? Number 2, powers. What do you need from government? There was a question in there about what do you think about the budget. I'm reluctant to ask that one. I think we could skip that. But what are the priorities for you to deliver your agenda? And then thirdly, growth. What's the appetite for growth? Will there be disputes within your areas about where growth goes, or is that something that you feel able to manage? And for Aviva specifically, will you maintain the same city centre presence? Bridget, over to you first.
Okay, well, I'll leave the others to explain how they're all going to get on with one another. I would say that the real challenge here is win-win. So it's about the stories that we can all tell, and yeah, I'll help at sort of, the national and regional level. And it's, as Andrew said, make it exciting, make them good stories, and this becomes a win-win. It's not about trying to share out something, it's about creating something. And that means that we all win. and that means that we can all have better lives. I think that these cities are actually very well placed. You're working together very strongly. You've got the spatial plan work going on. East-West Rail, at least some stages of it already been financed. Keep the pressure up. Go for it.
Thank you, Bridget. Lewis, over to you.
Well, money really matters. I have some sympathy for Rishi Sunak. That was a really hard budget to write, but it really only soars through to Christmas. And I do think, and I hope, that Treasury and civil servants are working really hard on a sector-based focus. So, sure, Cambridge has probably ridden better than many cities, albeit that we really do have a divide, but we're only half of our city is actually functioning at the moment. So our city centre isn't functioning, our international students aren't functioning, our research has been sort of halted in a whole range of areas. And like all of the cities, we are also an engineering city. So we do need to get some nuts and bolts focus by government on each sector, because our cities will not work unless all parts are singing. And I just want to see a dialogue with government, with cities like ours, on letting us hold on to some of that income that you explained earlier, Chris, that they nick. Businesses think that we use the business rates. It just disappears into a black hole in Whitehall. Let us hold on to the business rates. Let us have some tax increment financing that we can justify can be really wisely used. Let us work as city regions with our neighbours. Get rid of all of the controls, get rid of a lot of the stuff that's stopping us getting on. And we'll also be greener as a result as well, because we'll be able to think through local solutions that actually are net zero and can build on technologies. We've got so much technology skill that's going to waste, and so much of that could help Britain become a net zero nation. So I'm a real optimist, but I hope that Rishi Sunak and Treasury are working on a longer term plan.
Great, thanks very much, Lewis. David, over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, on the competition point, I don't see that the six of us are in competition. I think we've all got shared agendas, and we're all trying to get the best for our areas individually and collectively. In terms of bounce back, I'm very confident that Swindon will bounce back, but across all six areas, I think what we've got to do is give people reasons to come back into town centres, and that will be a slightly different answer probably in each of the six places. In my own town, we need to get more people living there, spending their money there, have an 18-hour economy rather than a 12-hour economy. At the moment, it's very or pre-pandemic at least, very focused on office workers supporting the economy. You've seen from the data in the report that, you know, we've bounced back pretty well, but actually if we're going to get back to pre-pandemic levels and above, we need more people coming in for leisure and for work, as well as some retail. But and in terms of what do we need from government? Well, continued investment, definitely, as Lewis said, and those two pots of money I referred to in my opening remarks are really welcome, but there's a lot more to do. So we're looking for more investment, both from the government and from the private sector. But as an authority with social care responsibilities, I'm really hoping that the white paper on social care that's promised by Matt Hancock in the last week will be coming forward, because so much of our spend, our revenue spend at least, goes on social care, that we don't really have a great deal of wriggle room or flexibility to invest in the other things that we'd like to do to grow our economy.
Brilliant, thank you, David. And Andrew.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I think we are in a really good place to bounce back. I think all the COVID environment has done is accelerate what we'd want to be doing and talking about. And I think all of the cities here are in a good place because they had a plan, they've been used to working together, and if they use this well, it's a way to just accelerate some of the changes that we know were going to happen anyway. So we need to take out some of the best things that have come out of COVID was making people at the centre of our thinking. You know, when else does an economy shut itself down? I thought all decisions were money-based. No, they're not. We just closed down our whole economy to look after people. Well, that's something that would never have happened under normal circumstances in quite that way. And so I think that's really come home to people, that how we treat each other and how we create the right environments for individuals to thrive is so important. And whether that's social mobility, how they work, how we get the best out of each individual, and we don't let people sort of squander their time and keep their talent hidden because of the conditions in which they happen to be living. So there's a responsibility for us to accelerate some of the changes that we want. Obviously, government needs to help us with that. I think targeted investment in the right place quickly would really be helpful. Just as where huge amounts of money have been put into things like furlough, why wouldn't you want to try and think about how you could target investment to get and use it as an investment to create growth and generate more income for UK PLC? And I think the important thing as you do that is, as the UK entity, just take pride in all of the things in promoting your cities. It's not just a London-centric environment. You need to promote great things that are going on across the UK. And we're really good examples across our 6 cities where some of us have a real international presence, and we really should be promoting the great activities that are happening and the really surprising things that are happening in cities where you wouldn't expect them to be. So I think from an Aviva perspective, yeah, we are a thriving business. We're committed to Norwich. We are centralising all of our offices into Norwich. So we are reducing some of our office space, as most companies in our position are doing, but we've made the decision to concentrate that in the city because it's important for Aviva to recognise, if it's working in the future, how a city is going to be part of that, and how people coming into the city need to not only experience a new way of working, a smarter way of working within an office environment, but actually also getting the most from being together in a social or a cultural environment in Norwich. And I think increasingly businesses are going to recognise this more balanced approach. And we perhaps go back to some of the thinking that was done in the 40s and 50s, where industries and businesses, if they didn't have their own football pitch, their own offices, their own gym, you know, that they somehow couldn't compete for the right people. Well, I think that's going to just re-emerge for the 21st century of how do you use the environment to create a fantastic place for businesses to thrive. And that's going to be much wider than just how the office looks and the reception area. That's going to be the whole community around it.
Right. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for your discipline, panel. We can just get one more question in. Ian, if I could ask you to also apply similar level of discipline in asking the question. Ian. So you're on mute. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the question I was going to ask was about what's the most important factor for ensuring young people are able to contribute to the region's development growth, particularly about mitigating the negative impact on a year of interrupted education.
Brilliant, thank you. So we'll go around same order. Any other final comments? You've got 2 minutes each. Bridget, thank you.
Oh gosh, what an impossible question. If only I knew the answer to that and had a panacea. So I think that it's the maximum thing must be about opportunity and how we work together to create opportunity. And that's both local authority, it's business, but it's also about, you know, where's that entry level and how do you combine that with continuing education and increasing opportunity? And so it comes back to the partnership word, which we've been using a lot. And I think in order to do that, we need to think about opportunity quite widely and not just in the context of, say, the high-tech jobs or industrial things. I'd like to push back a little bit actually on you, Lewis, because I think asking government for an industry plan is the worst thing we can do, because it becomes back to that top-down, everybody's going to look the same. And you know, Chris, you and I will remember all of those city plans where everybody wanted to have exactly the same thing. And what we've got to do is celebrate diversity, and diversity in all its aspects. And that includes the distinctiveness and the diversity of your own city and your own people. And then actually look at it bottom up. So I think the real way to improve the opportunities for young people is to get them to define the opportunities that they want, rather than us telling them what the opportunities that they ought to want. Because that way, I mean, we've been having regional policy and city policies and everybody else's policies for that matter for decades, and it doesn't work very well. Engaging with the people who are actually going to be affected, that is actually the way to do this. And it's not easy. It requires much more deliberative skills. So I would suggest that the first action is to get the people who are going to be delivering these policies to go and learn how to do deliberation and how to engage with the people their policies are going to affect. Not easy, but I think that's the way forward.
That's great. Thank you very much, Bridget. And Lewis, over to you.
Just to clarify where I am on macroeconomics, I just believe that looking forward, government does need to think through city centres, engineering, visitor economy, and I'm not asking Bridget for top-down sector-led leadership. I am asking for bottom-up focus on the strengths that we've got, and the fact that if you look at a city in terms of economy, at the pie chart of each of our six, they're different, but we have really strong common elements of 5 or 6 really high importance employers, as well as exciting opportunities for our young people. And we just need government to think about that. So we've got a survival plan to Christmas, good. A lot of it is good, but I just want to see the opportunities for our young people. So one of the issues I can't answer in 10 seconds is we have to give young people a voice. They don't get a say. So let's actually ask under 30s as well as under 20s, what is it that they want? Because they don't get a say. So that's one point. My final point, Chris, would be just, yeah, they have been hard hit. I remember the early 1980s, and there's a real risk that people, particularly those with mental health issues or other challenges, will be out of a job for not just 1 year, but 5 years. So I do think that whole skill and people-focused look at that the people between the ages of 16 and 25 is vital. And yes, we need to have a longer-term agenda for young people, but let's focus on the 16 to 25-year-olds very quickly. Rishi Sunak, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lewis. David, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, and thanks for the question, Ian. I mean, this is a really important issue for not only for the well-being of our young people, but for the future of our economy and country. We know that young people have been really badly affected during the pandemic, and we need to give them the opportunities that they need to thrive in the future. So I think there's a three-pronged attack that we need here. One is to ensure that we have the right institutions in our places to ensure that the educational opportunities are there for those who are academically minded, and indeed those who are less academically minded and perhaps more practical in their approach. I think the local authorities have a role to play in all this, in facilitating it, but I think the most important role is actually with the businesses. You know, there are some great apprenticeships out there at the moment in the market, and I would love to see a lot more, but we need the businesses to work with the colleges and the local authorities to make sure that the right courses are offered so that those businesses can take on the young people as and when they qualify, and can help them continue to develop their lifelong learning a program once they've got into one of those businesses. So yeah, businesses can't do it all, but I think there's a really important role there for them to, and no doubt Andrew will pick up on that in terms of what Aviva are doing. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, David. And Andrew, final words.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, I think young people, I think they're more robust than we give them credit for. I think they will take quite a lot out of this unique experience they've had, and they will bounce back and they'll adapt and probably use it because they've probably learned more about themselves over the last 12 months than they normally would have done. And I think that's really the key to this is understanding how we get individuals to recognize their capability and their potential. That's the key. Most people are oblivious to it. In fact, most people go through their whole lives without really understanding what they're fully capable and what their full potential is. And if we just had one young person in the UK, we would devote an awful lot of care and love and attention to that individual, and we'd make sure that their potential was fully realized. We just get bamboozled by the fact we've got millions rather than just one. And I think if we could give a life coach to each individual to understand what their skills were, how they're going to develop that agility of thought that's going to make sure that they're free of just tick boxing exams or going into one role and that's it. They're going to have to multi-skill, they're going to have to go into multiple sectors, multiple jobs, they're going to have to be more entrepreneurial. So I think anything that we can do to give them confidence, unlock their curiosity about what they can achieve, and they are not constrained just by the geography of where they were born, and they're not constrained by anything that they have locally in their lives, they can move beyond it. And I think how we unlock that, it's easy to say, is a real challenge, and people like Aviva and the businesses and the people I work with are doing work to volunteer, to be out in the schools, to go and do things locally for what they can do for the local schools where young people congregate. And I know for the Norwich 2040 vision, Alan, leader of our Norwich City Council, has reached out and made sure that young people and young people organisations have been involved, because most of us around the table won't be active economically in the city in 2040. So we need to engage the people who will be. So it's been a really important part of our thinking, both as a business and as a city. Thanks, Chris.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrew. And thanks very much to all of our panel. You now hear a virtual round of applause for all your contributions, which have been really succinct and incisive. And I hesitate to summarise any of that, but just a couple of thoughts have occurred to me as people were speaking. And the first one being that it is interesting, I find, that we start a conversation about infrastructure and powers and investment, and a lot of it comes back down to human relationships, a set of relational issues about dialogue and how we get on with each other between institutions, which are of course made by people. And there were just 4 key points within that, just very briefly worth reflecting on. The first was, I think I've got a very strong sense of a message of going with the flow of what exists, not reinventing the wheel, creating new institutions or necessarily mechanisms. A lot of the plans, a lot of the thinking is there, and of course that needs challenge and it needs capacity to deliver, but trying to superimpose a national kind of view or will over that would absolutely be the wrong thing to do. And the second is therefore taking a place-based approach, understanding how all these issues come together within a place and their interdependency, and the role of not just local government but private sector leadership and others in convening a place to deliver those things across the piece. And the third therefore is how partnerships evolve and develop that are capable of taking the strain of some really difficult issues and difficult decisions that are going to have to be made going forward. And that feels like it does need to be an almost indivisible partnership between public, private, third sector to be able to do that and share that load and that responsibility. And the final one was, in order to do any of the above, in order to deliver any of those things, places need to be able to exercise rights as well as taking on responsibilities. And that comes back, I think, to the argument about devolution and powers as well as resources. So fantastically rich set of contributions. I think we've understood an awful lot about what's going on in each of those places. And Andrew Carter, I'm pleased to say, handing back at spot on time, I believe. Over to you, Andrew. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Chris, and thank you to you, Chris, for chairing that that session. As you say, great discussion, lots of richness and lots of things for us to take away. So as we move towards closure, I'm going to ask Susan to come back in and add her sort of reflections to what she's heard, make any points that she wants to re-emphasize any points that she's made already, or introduce some points that maybe she wants to talk to us about now. So Susan, back to you.
Thanks very much, and I'm relieved that I don't think I'm going to be repeating what Chris said. I've hopefully picked up some different points. So thank you very much for what's been a really fascinating discussion. Frankly, I could have listened to it for hours, but in fact, Chris timed it beautifully and got it spot on in terms of our agenda. So well done. I think one of the things that I was hearing from our speakers was the importance of planning, and that was one of the things that I wanted to pick out, really. And I think both Bridget and Lewis in particular touched on this, about the importance of sustainable development, of planning well, of making sure that our design standards were high and that livability is being built into our communities. And alongside that, it made me reflect on the fact of what we want and what we don't want for our cities, I think. So I can say that there's quite a clear idea in my mind of what I don't want for my city moving forward. I don't want it to be like Aspen, Colorado, where it's such an unaffordable city that they have huge workforce problems. They basically have to bus people in from outside and house people in hostels, and no ordinary person can afford to live there. And by that I mean I'm including teachers, for instance, as well. That's not the sort of communities that I think any of us aspire to have. So what kind of communities do we want? What kind of cities do we want? Well, I think one of the things that we haven't actually talked about particularly today, but I think a lot of us are thinking about, is the 15-minute city. The idea that within a really short distance, you can have your work, your leisure, and your home. And I think that actually, although we haven't used that phrase up until now, that is part of what we have been talking about. And certainly from a sustainable point of view, that is the ideal in terms of reducing our carbon footprint on the world. But I think it also addresses the points that Andrew was talking about in terms of excitement, and Lewis too, about, you know, what is it cities offer people in terms that is different to other places, and it is part of that excitement. It's been part of a bigger picture, but cities can also offer neighbourhoods to people. And I think one of the things that the pandemic has taught us is that actually, if you do stick to your local neighbourhood, if you do shop and work and live there, then in fact, you get to know your neighbours. The neighbourhood becomes a much more friendly place. And if you take the traffic out as well, and that is a crucial part of it, and it's one of the reasons, you know, there was less traffic because people weren't driving off to work, and the roads became a much friendlier place. So we do need to try and build on some of those advantages that we've had through the pandemic to make our cities even better places to live. Other things that I just wanted to briefly pick up on were the points. I think I'm not quite sure, I don't think anybody quite put it like this, but the nobody left behind aspect of the work that I think we're all seeking to do here, which is about, I think we have a shared set of values across the fast growth cities about trying to make sure that we're skilling up all of our populations, and that they are all able to benefit from the strengths of our local economies. And I think the emphasis on levelling up in terms of skills was brought out by all of the speakers very importantly. I think Andrew talked very cogently about the collaboration and its importance in everything that we're doing, and in a sense, we're not just competing regionally or locally, but many of our cities and us as a collective are actually competing on a global scale. So that collaboration locally and within the UK is really important if we're going to have a voice on that global economic stage. I think the work that he talked about with our universities is very important as well in terms of developing better educational attainment and skills locally. So I think that will be a key part of our work going forward. And finally, the question about young people, I think, is really important. And certainly in Oxford, one of the things that we did several years ago was to engage with local young people. And when I say young people, I mean really young people, including primary school children, for our 2050 vision for our city, because we recognise that we're not going to be the ones who are going to be delivering that or even necessarily living in it, but they are. And similarly, we've just done similar work on our strategic vision for Oxfordshire. And I think it is very important to be actually hearing what young people have to say. And funnily enough, housing is a really key part of that, because I think young people are recognising the fact that it's becoming ever more difficult for them to aspire to live in the places that they grew up. And to get back to that housing and sustainable development and planning, people in our city have a not unreasonable aspiration that their kids, when they grow up, are going to be able to live also in the city that they grew up in. And they don't want to be living 10, 20 miles away in a dormitory town, but that is what they are having to do at the moment. And that is and that's not what they're aspiring to. So I think we need to work out how we can make that a better experience for people. And Bridget, of course, was quite right to be talking about bottom-up developments of those sorts of plans, because that is where we always should be. I'm just going to finally conclude by saying that I did ask a question myself, but I don't think it was taken, because Lewis said at one point that he endorsed 99.9% of what I said. So that's just left me wondering what on earth the 0.1% I said that he doesn't agree with is, but I'll take that up with him later. So back to you, Andrew.
Susan, thank you very much indeed. So a lot has been said, which means we've got a lot to think about and to action. I'm not going to add in my own summary and reflections, because I think Susan and Chris did brilliant jobs in pulling out the big themes and the big issues. So it really just for me is to thank our brilliant speakers in parts 1 and 2. Obviously, very much thanks to Chris for chairing part 2. Thanks to you for all joining, putting your questions. We can never get through all of them, but we're very appreciative of the questions that you submit anyway. So thank you very much for doing that. As I said at the start, you'll find a recording of the event, so you can watch it all again. The slides that Kathrin used right at the beginning, and the report that we've been discussing, all on our website, centreforcities.org. A little plug that our next event at Centre for Cities is next week on the 18th of March. And we're trying to particularly look at in a bit more detail about what the COVID roadmap means for our cities, and in particular our city regions. So looking at some of those bigger places that Chris was talking to us about there. So hopefully I'll see some of you next week. But until then, take care and stay safe. Thank you very much for being with us. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.